Okay, welcome back to the Now That's Weird radio show on TV, and with me is, well, I've been trying to track down for the last couple of years here at Congress. Finally got him. It's Daniel Sheehan. And now, Danny, I've got to say, first off, well done on a fantastic speech here this week.
Oh, far out. Thank you, Ron.
Now, you've come a long way from your beginnings, if you like, on this, from your start of UFO research to where you are today, where you're actually holding groups and telling people how to cope with what's, the forthcoming disclosure, if you like, or the forthcoming contact. What's made you make such an incredible jump?
Well, I think that the public press conference held by the Vatican in November, on November 10th of 2009, is a really important turning point here. I think that when the Catholic Church holds a 5-day conference of scientists on the issue of extraterrestrial intelligence and comes out and explicitly announces from the Holy See at the Vatican that there's reasonable grounds for believing that our human family will have contact with an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization in a very few short years, and that it's time to start confronting the serious and profound philosophical and theological questions that implies for our own sense of our self-image, that I think that's really time for people, especially someone who's been for 10 years the chief counsel for the Jesuit order in the United States, to come forward and to start to ask those questions and to have our people, ourselves, pursuant to the dictates of the Vatican II, that the people of God are the church is the people. It's not the hierarchy or the government of the United States or anybody else to start addressing those kind of questions. We don't need some elite governing class of people to answer those questions for us. We need to answer the questions, but of course we have to ask ourselves the questions to begin with. We have to give ourselves permission to start asking these questions and answering them. So I thought that it was appropriate to reach out to all the people who were gathered here at the International UFO Congress here in 2010, the first gathering since this announcement by the Vatican, that we ought to begin this process in earnest. And so that I felt this was kind of like a green light to go to it.
Fantastic. Now let's take a step back. When you first got involved with this, there was a lot of information and disinformation on the internet about your involvement with President Carter and the search for UFOs. Now the story I heard, whether it's true or not, was that Carter got into government, decided he was going to find out everything there was to know about UFOs, and was told, sorry, it's on a need to know, Mr. President, and you don't need to know. And he actually employed you to go search for him. Is that correct?
Well, no. It didn't happen that way. Here's how it happened. That when President Carter was elected in November of 1976, he was elected on November 4th of 1976. On around the 29th of November, the president-elect contacted the director of the Central Intelligence Agency at that time. That was George Herbert Walker Bush. Was still there. He had been selected as the head of the CIA by President Ford when Ford came in and took the place of Richard Nixon, when Richard Nixon resigned in August of 1974. And so when Carter, president-elect, wanted to be briefed on this issue of UFO stuff, he contacted George Herbert Walker Bush. He held a meeting with him and asked Bush to turn over to him all of the information, start putting together a report for him as the incoming president on all the information about extraterrestrial intelligence and UFOs. And Bush told him, what happened in the meeting is that Bush said, look, I would like to make a counter offer to you. I want you to agree to leave me in as your Central Intelligence Agency director. I want to establish a non-politicized office for the head of the CIA in the same way that Hoover had established this position for the FBI, that Hoover had remained in as the director of the FBI from Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, liberals and conservatives, and George Bush Sr. wanted to have that type of a post. So he asked Carter, as a condition of his making a decision as to whether he was going to give Carter this information or not, to have Carter agree to have him stay as his CIA director. And President Carter said no, that he had his own person in mind for this, which actually turned out to be Theodore Sorensen, Teddy Sorensen, is who he wanted to have as his director. And so Bush said that, well, in that case, he wasn't going to give him the information. That, you're not the President of the United States yet. I'm still the CIA director, and I'm not going to exercise my discretion to give this to you. And if you want to get this, you're going to have to go to the Science and Technology Committee of Congress, ask them to contact the Library of Congress, Science and Technology Division, and have them file the appropriate applications to have this declassified if you want this, right? That's what happened. And so what President-elect Carter did is, when he came into office in January 21st of 1977, he had his science advisor contact the Science and Technology Committee of Congress and ask them to contact the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service and have a major study done for him and ask to release the documents. That's what happened. And so that communication was undertaken to the Science and Technology Committee of Congress. They communicated with the Congressional Research Service. Now, I knew nothing about this at all, that anything was going on at all. I wasn't retained by him to do this. What happened is that it must have been March, I think around March or so of 1977, I was having dinner with Rosemary Chalk, who was the executive secretary of the National Academy of Sciences. That she happened to go to the same church that I went to. Actually, it was a Catholic community, and she had asked me to come to her home for dinner. I went to her home for dinner, and we were talking, and she was saying, that's amazing. You've done the Pentagon Papers case. You were there for the Watergate burglary case. You were there at Attica Prison. You did all these different cases. You must have always wanted to be a lawyer. You kind of this born lawyer. And I said, well, no, actually, I had originally wanted to be an astronaut. And she said, an astronaut? I said, yes. And I was one of the top 5 in New York State for the senatorial appointment to the Air Force Academy back in 1963. And so I went and interviewed with the United States Senator, Kenneth Keating. It was Jacob Javits. They were the 2 senators at the time. I interviewed with Jacob Javits, and he asked me why I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, and I told him that I thought this was the most exciting thing in the world to do, and I wanted to be involved in reaching out into outer space to establish contact with the extraterrestrial civilizations. And he was kind of completely dumbfounded that anybody would say that to him. And then he said, you mean you actually think that there's an extraterrestrial civilization? And I just said, well, absolutely. Of course, so do you. I mean, you're a United States Senator. You know this is true. I said, so that I want to be involved in that. And he was so flabbergasted that he actually admitted to me, apologized, that he had already given the appointment to someone, and he wasn't supposed to have.